I'm Lisa from sewnlife.com, and in this video I'm going to show you how to hand sew like a sewing machine. So here is an example. It's a lot easier than you might think. It's actually really easy to sew so neatly that it looks like it was sewn by a machine. So let's get going.
Okay, so first of all, what I'm going to do is show you a really good way to practice sewing like a machine. So I've got some fabric here. The fabric I'm using is felt. I would recommend that you use a fabric that is plain for the time being, just so that you can see your stitches, and don't use something silky that moves around a lot. Just give yourself an easier job. Felt is a perfect fabric because it sort of sits nicely, it doesn't move very much. You're generally, when you're hand sewing running stitch or back stitch, you're going to use two fabrics probably to sew together. So just for this example, I've got a piece of felt folded in half and we're going to sew along there. I've just put that pin in to keep it solid. Sorry, to keep it flapping around. So the way that I would recommend you doing it first is, because this is just a tester, get yourself a ruler and a very sharp pencil and just draw a line, straight line. Now this is only practice, so it doesn't matter. Okay, so you've got a straight line now, and what we're going to do is we're going to follow this straight line for practice, and then afterwards we'll do it again without the line, and you will have got used to sewing on your practice one, and then you won't need to draw the line anymore. I've threaded my needle and I've got some red thread so that you can see the stitches. Normally you would use a thread that matches the colour of the fabric that you're using, but I'm going to use this red thread. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in along this line. You'll see that I'm holding the fabric in my hand, and what I've also got is at the back I have my finger, which sort of helps guide my needle. So at the back, when I'm putting my needle through, I can feel it on my finger, and that finger is actually sort of helping to guide my needle back through to the front. So that's the way I hold my fabric. So first of all, we're going to do the first stitch, and that first stitch is going to be what secures the rest of the stitching, keeps the rest of the stitching in place. Right, so we're going to go in, so you're going to go right through to the back, and then you're going to come out, say that's what, probably about 5 or 6 millimeters. It's better if you do smaller stitches. So can you see that's about 5 or 6 millimeters? And I'm going to come all the way through. I'm not going to pull my thread all the way through. I'm going to leave a little bit at the edge. Okay, and that's just so that it will allow me to do my first stitch securely. You can cut that off at the end if you want to, but what you're going to do now is going to go back exactly into the same place. Okay, so you're going to do exactly the same stitch. Don't be too harsh with it because at the moment it's not secured. So pull that stitch. Okay, so that's fairly secure now, but we're going to do another one again in exactly the same position. So I'm going through to the back, and I can feel, can you see, I can feel my needle coming out at the back with that finger. I'm sort of using that as a rest, and can you see where my thumb is as well? I'm sort of almost guiding my needle to come out at the right place. I'm sort of bending my fabric a little bit so that my needle knows which spot to come back up in. Okay, so second time, and then I like to do one more stitch, okay, just to be sure. So I'm going back, so this is now going to be my third stitch on that first, first stitch. Oh, it's running away. But what I'm going to do now is I'm not going to come back out in the same place. I'm going to come back about 5 millimeters away from this stitch. So I'm going to go to the back, and I'm going to come up, can you see, about 5 millimeters away. So I've got my thread in the middle, and that is directly in the middle of those two sides, and I'm going to pull that through. Okay, so you've got your first stitch, which is now secured, and then you've come back about 5mm away. Now, this is called back stitch, and the reason it's called back stitch is because you are going to go back on yourself. So I'm going to go back into the place, into the end of that first stitch, look. And I'm going to do the same as I did before, so I can feel the needle at the back with my finger. And I'm going to do the same as I did before. Look, I'm coming out 5mm in front of it. Okay. And pull. And I am going to continue doing that. So again, back into the previous stitch and back out 5mm in front. Okay, and again, now when you do hand sewing, it's actually really therapeutic. It's a much slower way to it's a much slower way to stitch, and it's quite meditative. So can you see what I'm doing each time? Okay, we'll take that pin out because I don't really need it in there anymore. What I would say is because you'll get in the flow, when you're in the flow, just look out for a couple of things. Just look out for your needle always touching your finger at the back so that you know that it's gone all the way through, because what you don't want to do is be sewing and not catching the other side of the fabric as well. You've generally got two pieces of fabric and you want to be catching both sides of the fabric, both pieces of fabric, sorry. So make sure when you go through, you can feel it at the back with your finger, and then that you're guiding your needle back out with your thumb, with your thumbnail. It's sort of showing you the way, leading the way. Okay, so another stitch. Now, when you come to the end, I like to do exactly the same as I did at the beginning to secure it. There'll be different ways, everybody will have sort of different ways, and some people use knots, but this is just the way that I do it. I've always done it, so I will show you what I do. So what I do is I've come out now, and I'm basically going to go back onto this last stitch and go over this last stitch 3 times, the same as I did at the beginning. So I'm going to put my needle back in, and instead of coming out to make another stitch, I'm going to come out at the same place as the thread is. Okay, you see that? So I've come to the end of my stitching line, so I'll do 1 stitch. I'm going to go exactly back over that same stitch again, twice, 3 times. Okay, I'm now going to cut off the end, and I'm going to do what I did at the other end, which is leave a little bit of a thread. Okay, just so that there's less chance that it will slip under. I mean, it won't, but I just like to leave a little bit of thread. So there you go, you have your first row of stitching, which is really, really neat. Okay, on the back as well, it's looking neat. It's not as neat on the back as it is on the front. But now what I would say is have a go doing exactly the same thing, but do it without your line. So I'm going to do it underneath now and see if I can have as straight a line as I did when I was following the drawn line. Okay, so let's do exactly the same thing. We'll start off the same. First stitch, leave a little bit. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. you see what happened there was that my thread, the end bit, actually got caught up in those stitches, but it doesn't matter. Just makes it a bit more secure in a way, so don't worry about anything like that. Right, so we're going to go back in and out. Okay. And carry on doing that. Okay, so I think that's pretty straight. I'm going to finish it now with a final stitch again. 1, 2, 3, cut it off.
So now that you've learnt how to hand sew like a sewing machine, you can sew lots of lovely projects with your hand sewing stitches. Hand sewing is a really, really nice thing to do. It's very slow, it's slower than machine sewing, but it's really therapeutic, almost meditative. So I think that it's a skill that you will very much enjoy. The joy of hand sewing as well is it's really portable. You can have something that you can pick up and move around the house. You can do it when you're travelling. It's easier than having a sewing machine, which involves being set up. So it's a lovely skill to do hand sewing. So the video that I recommend next is how to thread a needle. It's a short video, but it just gives you a few different options of which way you would prefer to thread a video. So it's sort of thread a needle. So it's a really easy video to watch, and I look forward to seeing you there. Happy sewing!